Tonight on Q2, a controversial ruling sends shockwaves all the way from Alabama to Montana.
Why does one person get to say what is right for everybody?
Tonight we're hearing from one Montana mother with 4 frozen embryos and looking how this could impact Montana. Plus, marching to the beat.
There may not be a performance drumline in Montana right now, but one of these kids down the road could very well start that.
A professional touring group, Drumline Live, stops in Billings.
I know this was a nail biter, but we are on the surface and we are transmitting, and welcome to the moon.
And on the moon, for the first time in more than 50 years, an American spacecraft touches down on the lunar surface. The MTN 10 o'clock news starts right now.
From Montana's news leader, you're watching the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this Thursday night. I'm Russ Riesinger. An Alabama Supreme Court ruling is sending shockwaves across the country and in Montana after the state's highest court there decided frozen embryos have the same protections as children. Hospitals in that state now abruptly have been halting in vitro fertilization treatments. That's leaving a lot of questions. Tonight, our Andrea Lutz introduces us to a Montana mom who says the future is uncertain for her own frozen embryos stored in another state.
Meet Leah and Luna.
I really wanted to be a mom.
Party of 2.
I tried a whole bunch of different options and ways for a couple years, and finally what stuck is getting a sperm donor and an egg donor and creating embryos.
After months of trying to get her, Luna is now 18 months old.
With science and everything, you can do it by yourself.
But regardless of how she got here, Luna belongs to Leah.
I just love her. I mean, I love having that little person like with you all the time, and her smiles and her giggles. And
But uncertainty fell over her this week, like so many other women.
The fact that they're even making decisions like that.
A ruling in the Alabama Supreme Court now means frozen embryos in that state are protected like any other child. This leaves Leah wondering what sort of legal precedent it could set.
I just can't help think of all the ways it could go and everything it could mean, and the control that not only me, but other women, other families could lose.
Leah says especially because she still has 4 other embryos now sitting in a Nevada facility, shipped and stored there from Billings Clinic.
Yeah, I have some left, which is great, but one doesn't take. What do they think about that?
While the ramifications of the ruling are still unclear, experts worry that it could have drastic consequences for fertility treatments.
But it became really personal.
She thinks about this Alabama ruling when she thinks about growing her own family.
Why does one person get to say what is right for everybody?
In Billings, Andrea Lutz, MTN News.
We reached out to the Right to Life of Montana organization about how this ruling leaves mothers like Leah uncertain. President Leanna Carlin tells us first that it's horrible that people who want to have a baby so badly are caught in such a painful conflict. But in a statement, she says, in part, this right to life exists regardless of stage of development, degree of dependency, location, appearance, age, gender, race, or any other arbitrary criteria. It's a decision that has put the issue of reproductive rights squarely back in the spotlight on the presidential campaign trail. Last night, Republican candidate Nikki Haley spoke on the ruling.
I didn't say that I agreed with the Alabama ruling. What the question that I was asked is, do I believe an embryo is a baby? I do think that if you look in the definition, an embryo is considered an unborn baby.
Vice President Kamala Harris also addressed the ruling during a roundtable on reproductive rights in the battleground state of Michigan today.
Individuals, couples who want to start a family are now being deprived of access to what can help them start a family.
The CDC says about 2% of all infants born in the U.S. are conceived using IVF each year. And here in Montana, voters will be choosing 2 new members to our Supreme Court, one Chief Justice and an Associate Justice position. The Chief Justice is currently between Broadwater County Attorney Corey Swanson, who filed on Tuesday, and former federal magistrate judge Jerry Lynch. Swanson describes himself as judicially conservative. He spent 27 years in the Montana Army National Guard and has been a county attorney since 2014. He says he sees a need to remove political bias from Montana courts, alluding to recent disputes between the legislature and the judiciary.
I think we need to ensure that the courts, to the very best of their ability, the judges should set politics aside and rule strictly on the facts and the law of each case. And I really think that's the answer to the conflict that we're seeing right now among the branches.
Meanwhile, Jerry Lynch from Missoula says he's going to emphasize his experience on the bench and make the case that the independence of the judiciary is under attack.
Let me put it this way. I entered this crucial race for Chief Justice to preserve, defend, and fight for the impartiality and independence of the courts, an independence that's essential for the protection of our constitutional freedoms. That's why I'm in this race.
2 district court judges have filed to run for the open associate justice position. Catherine Bittagary of Sidney and Dan Wilson of Flathead County. The filing date is March 11th. If you've had trouble getting your prescriptions filled this week, you are not alone. Pharmacies all across the country are reporting delays filling orders because of a cyber attack on one of the nation's largest healthcare technology companies. As our Charlie Kleps reports, it's a threat that extends far beyond the healthcare field.
This pharmacy drive-through at Albertsons on Grand may be empty now, but on Wednesday night it was packed with vehicles as customers tried to fill their prescriptions.
But yeah, in the last 3 months, really it's even skyrocketed.
It's one of those things many of us wouldn't even think about.
When they do get hacked, it affects you huge.
But as the world continues to rely even more on the internet, cyber attacks have become perhaps one of the biggest threats to businesses today.
In reality, 82% of attacks become of the cloud. So if you're in the cloud, you're more likely to be attacked.
It's a problem the Billings tech guys have seen increase firsthand. While their local business is primarily focused on repairing tech problems, they also have gotten involved in cybersecurity.
It's kind of like a fraud detection on your credit card. If you log in, it's going to notice it right away, block the sign in, and not let them in.
Billings felt those effects Wednesday night as Change Healthcare, a tech company that often serves as a link between pharmacies and insurance companies, suffered a cyber attack. That attack sent ripples through the healthcare industry. Blue Cross Blue Shield was among those impacted and released this statement saying, quote, "We're aware that some pharmacies are experiencing systems issues due to a nationwide outage. If you choose not to delay filling your prescription, you have the option to pay for the medication out of pocket and submit the receipt with the reimbursement information."
Yeah, just kind of what we've seen in the last 2 years, 3 years or so, it's really picking up, especially in small businesses.
Solberg says that while the issue hit a larger national corporation, it proves how important heightened security is for smaller businesses that can often be easier to hack.
They know they don't have anything in place, and they're making easy targets.
Just being educated is the biggest thing we say, just so we can hit on where they're sitting at as a business and what we recommend moving forward.
In Billings, Charlie Kleps, MTN News.
That wasn't the only major outage. AT&T's network suffered widespread cellular and internet outages across the country today. Verizon, T-Mobile, and Cricket also reported outages, mainly impacting anyone trying to contact AT&T users. The outage impacted more than 73,000 customers, but as of this afternoon, AT&T reported all services had been restored. The company says a technical error triggered the service disruption while they were updating their network.
Here's something we don't see too often on the Almanac as we take a look with the Stockman Bank weather cam. We're right exactly at the yearly total, the average that we would see so far into this year, and also for the month, exactly the amount of snow we would see based on the 30-year average, even though we're way behind for the season. 54 was the warmest reading today, but what stands out, the winds gusting up to 37 miles an hour, and across the eastern plains, we saw a lot more of those strong wind gusts. Here's a look at the forecast for the winds around Big Timber. We're going to see gusts 50+ miles per hour. We're going to talk more about wind, a lot more coming up in a few minutes from now.
Tonight, high school music students from Billings and Laurel received a once-in-a-lifetime experience performing alongside touring professionals. It's all part of Drumline Live as they aim to bring the beats to Montana. Earlier today, the theater company and students met with our Marcus Kakova for a behind-the-scenes look.
Proud to present to you the greatest show on stage, Drumline Live.
Drumline Live is a theatrical production, musical attraction based on the movie Drumline, and full circle based more so on the historically Black college and university culture.
Us as African Americans get to bring our culture. You go to Broadway, it's not a whole lot of black shows on Broadway, you know what I'm saying?
Now I can say that I went to over maybe 20 states just by traveling with Drumline Live.
What's began as an expansion of our nation's cultural palette for more remote and homogenized places like Billings, Montana.
The HBCUs are only in so many cities. These are the places that we need to go to, not necessarily where there's an HBCU base, but where there isn't an HBCU base.
Basically, we're bringing the HBCU culture to you guys. It really gets everybody hyped because a lot of times they only see it on TV.
Is now expanded into a confidence-building exercise for students with musical gifts from all walks of life.
I'm glad that they gave us the opportunity to do this, not with just my high school, but with almost every single high school nearby.
We're not different schools, but we're one big city. We can play as one big city too.
Having that encouragement from the parents, the professionals really makes you feel inspired and feel incredible, you know. It makes you want to do incredible things in your life.
You get inspired and like, oh, I want to do that too.
A familiar story for those running the show, like director Don P. Roberts, the executive band consultant for the show's cinematic namesake.
You see the Hollywood aspect now, but I am a kid of the system that was from the projects. And I lived in the Atlanta housing projects for 17 years. And historically Black college university changed my life.
That's the big part. I can do this too. That was my mentality growing up. Like I said, I had a professional trumpet player as a teacher. It was like he puts his pants on the same way I do.
I tell everybody, always, you can always be the first one, right? Somebody always had to do it first.
You never know who you may put that spark in and who you may encourage.
Marcus Kukova, MTN News.
During this Black History Month, we're taking a look at a few outstanding Montanans trailblazing their own way. One of those making a major difference in his community is Paul George, the chief of police in Hardin. He's believed to be Montana's first African-American police chief, being hired last year after a stint in Georgia. The 31-year-old is currently the only supervisor with the Hardin Police Department. While that allows for very little free time, he hopes he can be an inspiration for others.
Anyone in law enforcement today here in Montana, African American or not, I think it's just a testament that you can achieve anything that you put your mind to, no matter where you go in life. A testament to all the African American officers in Montana. Maybe they'll sit in my seat or a different chief seat here in Montana one day. So just forge on.
George took over for previous chief Donald Babin after he left for a role in another state. Still to come on the MTN 10 o'clock news here on Q2, a giant step forward. For the first time in more than half a century, an American spacecraft has landed on the moon. That story next. And later in sports, tourney time. Eastern A divisionals in full swing at Metra. We'll have all the highlights coming up in just a bit.
From Montana's news leader, you're watching the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Well, check this out. A beautiful shot from our iCam on this Thursday night of the moon over the Magic City, where an American spacecraft landed there today. It was the first time that an American spacecraft has landed on the moon in more than a half century.
I know this was a nail biter, but we are on the surface, and welcome to the moon.
Transmissions from the moon lander Odysseus indicate it touched down on the lunar surface at about 4:23 this afternoon. It marks the first time that a U.S. spacecraft has landed on the moon since Apollo 17, 52 years ago. And it's the first time ever that a lander built by a private company has successfully made the trip. The six-legged, 14-foot-tall lander was built by Texas-based Intuitive Machines.
What a triumph. Odysseus has taken the moon. This feat is a giant leap forward for all of humanity.
Odysseus blasted off from Florida last Thursday. It will stay on the moon, conducting experiments for a week. Intuitive Machines is one of several companies in NASA's program for private businesses to make deliveries to the moon. Odysseus's journey and subsequent ones like it serve as precursors to NASA's Artemis mission to put humans on the moon by 2026 or 2027. Ed's joining us again, and it was a really nice night out there to get a look at the moon.
Absolutely. It's going to appear full, and you may have noticed it looked a little bit smaller than the average full moon. In fact, we'll call it mini moon. Let's take a look at the graphic, because this is the opposite of a super moon. We're at the farthest point away as far as the Earth and the moon go, so it actually even affects tides a little bit. They're a little bit weaker, and that moon will appear a little bit smaller the next couple of nights, but it will also have a clear sky. We'll come back and take a look at the forecast next.